The night had been quiet, the kind of silence that seeps into a man's bones after too many years alone. I was pouring myself a glass of whiskey when I saw them, shadows moving at the edge of my ranch under the silver wash of starlight. 11 women, their forms tall and graceful, their beauty strange yet irresistible. Their eyes glistened like liquid jewels, and their voices trembled when they spoke. "Please, we have nowhere else to go. Let us stay, even if only for a night." The loneliness I had buried for years struck like fire in my chest. They weren't ordinary women. They were widows, their sorrow woven into every breath they took, their presence both heartbreaking and intoxicating. And though I knew nothing about them, my hands ached to reach out, my heart desperate to break its silence. I had lived alone for 15 years. The ranch was quiet, too big for just me, and the walls carried memories I rarely let myself face. My days were filled with routine, tending to the fields, repairing fences, feeding the horses, then sitting at the porch to watch the horizon melt into night. Some might have called it peace, but to me it was survival, keeping busy so I wouldn't have to remember what it felt like to hold someone close. That night, when they appeared at the fence line, my first instinct was suspicion. Strangers weren't welcome on my land, and strangers from beyond Earth least of all. I tightened my grip on the shotgun leaning against the wall. But as the moonlight touched their faces, my resolve faltered. They were not armed. They carried no weapons, only weary eyes and silent grief that clung to them like a shroud. The tallest among them stepped forward. Her hair shimmered with faint luminescence, falling across her shoulders like strands of silver fire. She bowed her head slightly before speaking again, her voice delicate but firm. "We are widows. We have traveled far. Your home is the only one that would allow us to cross without being hunted. Will you turn us away?" Her words pierced deeper than I cared to admit. Something inside me twisted, the loneliness I'd caged suddenly rattling against its bars. I should have told them to leave, to find shelter elsewhere, but the way her eyes held mine made it impossible. "Why here?" I asked, my voice rough from disuse. A different one answered, her skin a deep shade that shimmered like polished stone. "Because no one else would dare take us. And because," she faltered, her lips trembling as if she held back the rest. The silence that followed pressed against me. 11 pairs of eyes watched, pleading but cautious. They looked fragile, and yet beneath that fragility there was strength, an allure that tightened around my chest. My instincts screamed that something was hidden here, something more than just desperate widows needing shelter. But my heart, the same foolish heart that had been starving for years, pushed those thoughts aside. I opened the gate. "One night," I said, though even as I spoke the words, I knew it wouldn't end there. They stepped inside, one by one, their movements graceful, almost reverent, as if crossing into holy ground. The scent of them lingered in the air, sweet, strange, intoxicating, stirring something in me I had forgotten long ago. Inside the house, they filled the space like a dream I hadn't dared dream. Their presence changed everything, the empty rooms now alive with quiet footsteps, hushed voices, the brush of fabric against wood. They carried with them small satchels, worn and tattered, as though they had traveled endlessly with nothing left but survival. I sat by the fire, watching them move. One knelt near the flames, her hands trembling as she warmed them. Another wandered the shelves, her fingertips brushing the spines of books I hadn't touched in years. Their beauty was undeniable, each distinct, each carrying an aura that set her apart from the rest. But it wasn't just beauty. It was the sorrow they bore, the longing in their silence, the way their eyes seemed to search for something they were afraid to name. The tall one who had spoken first approached me. "We will not trouble you. Just a corner to rest, and by morning we will be gone." But I shook my head. "The desert isn't kind at night. Stay until you're ready to move." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, grateful, relieved, and yet, something more. Something unspoken. As the fire crackled, I felt their presence wrapping around me like a cloak. My loneliness, once my only companion, seemed to recoil in retreat. But alongside the warmth grew a question I couldn't silence. Why here? Why me? I caught them stealing glances, whispering in a language I didn't know. And when they thought I wasn't watching, their eyes softened, hungry, almost tender, as if they saw not a broken old man, but someone they had been seeking all along. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I feared them, but because I feared myself. The pull I felt was undeniable, a tide rising too strong to fight. They had asked for shelter, but in truth, I wondered if they had come for something far more dangerous, something that could awaken everything I had tried so hard to bury. And as dawn began to creep across the ranch, painting the sky in pale gold, I realized one thing with frightening clarity. My life was no longer mine alone. The morning light spread across the ranch, gilding the fences and warming the earth, but inside my home the air still carried their presence, soft, fragrant, almost unreal. 11 widows had filled the empty rooms, and it felt as though I had woken into a dream I couldn't quite trust. They moved quietly at first, as though afraid to disturb me. One tended to the fire with careful hands, another laid her shawl over a chair as if she meant to claim a piece of the house. I watched from the doorway, torn between suspicion and the warmth that stirred in my chest. For years I had grown used to silence, but now I found myself listening for their footsteps, their voices, the sound of gentle laughter slipping between walls that hadn't heard joy in too long. I tried to keep my distance. I told myself they were strangers, and strangers brought questions I might not want the answers to. Yet the distance never held. By the corral, as I checked the horses, 2 of them appeared with quiet smiles. They moved with grace that belonged to another world, their gowns flowing in the breeze. One of them, her hair shimmering faint blue under the sun, reached a hand toward the mare's muzzle. The horse, usually skittish with outsiders, nuzzled against her as if charmed. She turned to me then, her lips parting in a smile that was gentle, disarming. "Your land," she said softly, "it breathes differently than anywhere we have walked. It feels safe." The word caught me. Safe. It had been years since I thought of my ranch that way. To me it was a prison of routine, but to them, it was sanctuary. I tried to answer with caution, but the warmth in her eyes broke my restraint. "It's yours, for as long as you need it." Her gaze lingered a moment too long, as if testing the edges of what I meant. Then she lowered her eyes, but not before I caught the flicker of something deeper, longing, perhaps, or a hope she dared not voice. As the day wore on, I saw more of them settle into my world. They swept the porch, gathered water from the well, spoke in their strange tongue when they thought I wasn't listening. Yet whenever I entered the room, silence fell, their eyes shifting to me in ways that stirred heat under my skin. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something else, something unspoken that bound them together in secret. That night, we shared a meal by the fire. I had cooked stew, simple and rough, but the way they ate made it seem like a feast. Their laughter echoed through the house, soft and melodious, and for the first time in years I felt alive. One widow, with dark eyes that glowed like embers, sat close, too close. Her knee brushed against mine under the table, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through me. She did not move away, and neither did I. When the others had retired, she lingered. Her hand traced the rim of her cup, her eyes searching my face. "You live alone," she said, her voice low. "But you are not meant to be alone." I swallowed hard. Her words struck deep, scraping against years of silence I had buried under work and solitude. "What makes you think that?" She leaned closer, her scent brushing against me like a secret promise. "Because I see the way you watch us. You ache for more than silence." Her boldness stunned me. My hand twitched as if it wanted to reach for hers, but I stopped myself. She smiled at my hesitation, as though she understood. Before I could answer, another widow appeared in the doorway, her eyes sharp, watching us. The one beside me straightened, her hand withdrawing, but not before her fingertips grazed mine in a fleeting, deliberate touch. The moment burned into me, leaving me restless. That night, lying awake in my bed, I felt their presence even through the walls. I could hear whispers in their language, voices hushed but urgent, as if debating something they dared not share. And in the quiet moments between, I felt it, the weight of their glances, the way they carried themselves around me. Each look, each gesture hinted at something more than gratitude. The days passed, and my ranch changed. Where once there had been silence, now there were voices and warmth. They moved like they belonged here, as if they had always been meant to fill the empty corners of my home. Yet the mystery grew heavier. They never spoke of where they came from or what they had endured, and though I asked, they only gave me half answers. Still, the romance of it tangled itself around me. At night, by the fire, they sat close, sometimes brushing against me, sometimes letting their eyes linger longer than modesty allowed. I was a man long starved, and each fleeting touch, each stolen glance unraveled me further. Then one evening, as I stacked wood near the barn, I found something tucked inside a satchel left carelessly by the door. A piece of cloth, marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, spiraling lines etched in silver thread, glowing faintly under the dusk light. It was no ordinary ornament. It carried weight, importance. I turned it over in my hand, frowning, when I heard a voice behind me. One of the widows stood there, her eyes wide, her lips parted as if she had been caught in a secret. She stepped forward quickly, snatching the cloth from my hands with a trembling grip. "That is not for you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her fear startled me more than her words. She clutched the cloth to her chest, her eyes glistening, and in that moment I knew the truth: whatever had brought them here was no accident. They had not stumbled upon my ranch by chance. They had chosen me. But why? As the night deepened, that question refused to leave me. 11 widows had come to my door, their beauty haunting, their sorrow real, their touches tender. But behind it all, there was something hidden, something that bound them together and drew them to me. And I was caught, too deep already, unable to pull away even if I wanted to. Because the truth was simple. I didn't want to. The symbol haunted me. Its silver spirals shimmered in my mind long after she had taken it back, her trembling hands and desperate eyes etched into my memory. I lay awake that night, listening to the muffled whispers drifting through the wooden walls of my ranch. They spoke in their strange language, hushed and urgent, like a secret they feared would be torn away if voiced too loudly. By morning, my resolve had sharpened. I had given them shelter, warmth, and trust, but the weight of mystery pressed too heavily on my chest. I needed answers. I found the tall widow, the one whose hair glimmered like silver fire, standing by the corral. She was watching the horses, her face softened by morning light, though her eyes carried the distance of another world. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Why are you here? What binds you to this place? To me?" She turned slowly, her expression unreadable, but in her eyes, something wavered. The silence stretched until it threatened to break me. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry centuries of grief, she spoke. "We were bonded," she said quietly. "Each of us, to warriors of our people. Strong men, fierce protectors. But they are gone, taken by war that left us wandering, untethered." Her gaze met mine, steady and unflinching. "In our culture, widows must seek sanctuary. We cannot remain adrift. Without a protector, we are exiled, vulnerable to those who would exploit us." Her words tightened around me like a noose. "Protector?" I asked, though I already felt the meaning settling in my chest. She nodded. "Yes. One who can shelter us, and bind us again." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Why me? Why my ranch?" For a moment, her composure faltered. She glanced toward the house where the others moved, their voices faint, their laughter thin. "Because you are not just a man who lives alone. You were chosen. Our fates led us here, and your solitude, it speaks to what we need." Her words stirred something deep and dangerous inside me. I wanted to push her for more, to demand the truth behind that symbol, behind their desperate eyes. But then she stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of her body, smell the faint sweetness that clung to her skin. "You are not meant to be alone," she whispered, echoing the words another widow had spoken before. "And we are not meant to be without you." The ground beneath me shifted. Loneliness, suspicion, desire, they tangled together until I could no longer separate one from the other. I should have stepped back. Instead, I let her linger, my silence betraying the storm inside me. Over the next days, I began to see it, their unspoken claim upon me. Each widow in her own way sought closeness, small gestures that built into something undeniable. One brushed against me as she passed, her fingers lingering on my arm longer than they needed to. Another brought me bread she had baked herself, her eyes shimmering as though the gift carried more meaning than food. At night, They gathered near me, their laughter soft, their voices weaving a net that drew me deeper into their circle. I felt it then, the pull of each of them, not as strangers, but as women searching for something only I could give. It was intoxicating, terrifying. My nights filled with restless dreams, visions of 11 faces gazing at me with longing, of hands reaching out to claim me. But with their tenderness came something else. Tension. It started in glances, quick and sharp between them when one lingered too long at my side. A silence that thickened when one widow laughed louder than the others at my words. Small things, but unmistakable, the stirrings of jealousy. One evening, as the sky bled into gold and violet, I sat with them around the fire. The warmth of their closeness pressed against me, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. I felt a hand slip into mine, delicate but firm, fingers threading through with unspoken promise. I turned to see which widow had dared, but before I could, another reached for my other hand, her touch equally insistent. The air thickened, their gazes locking across the fire, sharp and possessive. Enough, the tall widow said, her voice cutting through the tension. The others stilled, their hands slipping away, but the fire in their eyes did not fade. That night, unable to sleep, I stepped outside. The stars stretched endlessly above me, cold and silent. Yet behind me, through the window, I saw them gathered together, their heads bowed close, speaking in urgent whispers. Their eyes flicked toward me, then away, as though caught between confession and secrecy. I was already in too deep. Their beauty, their sorrow, their desire, I was drowning in it. And yet the question that gnawed at me would not let go. Later, as the house grew quiet and shadows deepened, one widow slipped into the hall where I stood. Her steps were soft, her eyes glistening as she met mine. "You must understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If you do not choose, if you cannot accept us, all of us, we will be forced into exile again. And this time, there will be no return." Her words carved through me like a blade. 11 widows. 11 women bound by grief, longing, and some fate that had tied them to me. And now, the weight of their survival pressed against my chest, heavy with both desire and dread. I wanted to demand answers, to know the truth behind their choice, behind the symbol and the whispers. But as she stood before me, her eyes wet, her lips parted in fear and hope, I realized something far more dangerous had already taken root. I could no longer imagine my home without them. I stood at the window that night, watching the stars while their words echoed inside me. "If you do not choose, we will be forced into exile again." The silence of the ranch pressed down like a weight, yet the house behind me pulsed with life, soft footsteps, hushed voices, the warmth of 11 women who had stepped into my solitude and filled it with dangerous longing. For 15 years I had told myself I didn't need anyone. But now, I couldn't deny it, I needed them. Every glance, every touch, every whisper had unraveled me until I was no longer the man who sat alone by the fire with nothing but ghosts for company. I was alive again, my heart pounding, my body aching with want I could no longer bury. The tall widow approached me first. Her silver-lit hair framed a face both proud and fragile, her eyes holding mine with quiet strength. "We came here for shelter," she said softly, "but what we seek is more than a roof over our heads. We seek a man who can give us back what was taken." Her words trembled with vulnerability, but beneath them lay something else, an invitation. One by one, the others joined her. 11 women standing before me, their sorrow etched deep, but their beauty luminous in the firelight. They had lost everything, yet in me they had found a chance to belong again. And in them, I found the warmth I thought I'd lost forever. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. All I could manage was the truth I could no longer deny. "I can't send you away. Not now. Not ever." Their faces shifted, relief, joy, and something deeper that set the air alight with tension. That night, the walls of my ranch bore witness to a transformation. The loneliness that had haunted me for years dissolved into something fierce and tender. They drew close, not just one, but many, their touches hesitant at first, then certain, as though they had been waiting for this moment since the day they crossed my fence line. The tall widow's hand brushed my cheek, trembling, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Then let us stay," she whispered. "Let us make this home not just for us, but for you as well." I kissed her then, and the world fell away. The fire crackled, their shadows danced across the walls, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. But it wasn't just her. As the night unfolded, so too did the others, each in her own way, some bold, some tender, some with laughter that warmed me, others with quiet touches that lingered long after. Jealousy had lingered before, but in that moment, it melted into something else. They weren't rivals. They were a family bound by loss, now bound by choice. And I was at the center, not as a prize to be fought over, but as the man who could hold them all. Days turned into weeks, and the ranch became something new. Where once there had been only silence, now there was laughter, warmth, and love in every corner. I woke to the sound of their voices, soft and sweet. I worked the fields with their hands beside mine, their laughter echoing through the air. At night, I returned to a home filled with warmth no fire alone could provide. They bloomed, each of them, no longer cloaked in grief but alive with joy. And I bloomed with them, shedding the shell of a man who had once believed himself beyond love. But even as peace settled, I knew this story was not finished. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw shadows moving at the far edge of my land, strangers, watching from the darkness. I felt the widows stiffen beside me, their eyes narrowing, their hands instinctively reaching for me. "They found us," one whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know who they were, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never let anyone take these women from me. They had come to my ranch broken, searching, and together we had built something unshakable. I tightened my arms around the nearest widow, my voice steady though my heart pounded. "This is our home now. And no one will take it from us." The widows looked at me then, their sorrow replaced by fierce devotion. 11 pairs of eyes, luminous and unyielding, fixed on me as though I were more than just a man, as though I were their anchor, their hope, their chosen protector. And as the night fell heavy around us, I knew the truth. My life was no longer mine alone. It belonged to them, 11 alien widows who had come seeking shelter, and who had instead given me back my heart.